Be attending tonight. Meeting's been properly noted, certified. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Approval of the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Jeff and Mary.
No, it was Mary and Diana.
Well, Jeff said it first.
Oh,
Jeff
I didn't hear. Okay, I didn't hear me. I didn't hear.
Jeff said it and
I'm
then
like,
Mary said
that
it.
didn't sound like Jeff to me.
Any questions or comments on the agenda or any changes requested? No? Okay, seeing none, we've got a motion by Jeff, seconded by Mary. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Approval of the March 17th, 2014 regular and executive session meeting minutes. I think we can do both.
So moved.
Everybody's here.
Second.
Keith and Jeff. Oh, just kidding. Diana? Any questions or comments on the meeting minutes? None? No questions? Okay, motion by Keith, seconded by Diana. All in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed? All right. March 31st, special and executive session meeting minutes.
So moved. Second.
Jeff and Keith. Questions, comments on these? Seeing none, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Addressing the board, school news. Do we have any school news?
I would just like to say I had my second coffee at Sholin's last Thursday, and I've had some great conversations both March and April. And I've had people just come up and say, "Oh, are you going to keep doing this?" And I said, "Yeah, through the summer I'm going to." And it's been really good. I think I'm very positive.
Good. Excellent.
Thank you.
Other school news from anyone? Yeah, Jeff.
Yes, on my board report, I indicated Mitchell Aiken, who's a seventh grader, moved ahead to the state level of the geography bee. And that's the top 100 geography students at the middle school level. He competed on Friday and finished 4th out of 100 students there.
Wow.
So, and he has another year, so who knows, he may be off to Washington DC next year and see him on television competing. But,
Excellent.
it's, excellent.
That's great news. Thanks for sharing that. Other school news? Yeah, Blaine.
So in the high school this week and past week, DECA went to the state conference in Lake Geneva. We took 20 students and we did all sorts of role plays and tests on marketing, business, stuff like that. So out of that 20 people, 8 of us are going to be going to ICDC, which is the international conference in Atlanta sometime in May. So that's a big chunk of people coming from state that moves on. So that's good for DECA. Also, the high school student council can do a blood drive this Wednesday. Everybody from the community is welcome there as well. And that's kind of a school-wide, community-wide blood drive that helps student council get scholarships for our seniors. And then athletics is starting up. Girls soccer is actually playing right now. And then the baseball just had a doubleheader on Saturday. They played East and Platteville. So everything's kind of starting to gear up again after a little month break.
Excellent.
No
Thank you
pitch for the bunny bolt?
Oh yeah, that's right, the bunny bolt. Of course, you got it. And then DECA's doing a 5K bunny bolt 2 weeks from now. So you can sign up for that. I think registration is $20. So all that comes to support the DECA members moving on to ICDC. And it's a fun community event, so.
Excellent. Thanks for that. Any other school news? Yes, Rachel.
Just planning ahead, on April 24th will be our second annual Related Arts Night. This is something we kind of piloted last year where we invited just first grade families and their first grader to come and do a rotation through all the possible related arts opportunities our kids go through in a day. The hope was to give parents the opportunity to taste what happens in art, music, ed guidance, and time in the library with Mrs. Kabler. So that's from 6 to 7:30 on April 24th. And so we ask families to come for the entire time, so they get to do 15 or 10-minute rotations within every site. It's a lot of fun, and parents get to be just as involved in the projects as the kids. So we had about 100 last year, which was a great start, and we look forward to beating that this year.
Excellent. Other school news? Okay, seeing none, do we have any citizens' comments? Citizens' comments? Citizens' comments? So, okay, seeing none. Financial business. Looks like we have the bids for the high school and early learning center windows.
And Mike's here from ESG, and you have them in front of you as well. You
Welcome,
should have
Mike.
The bids and summary of.
Did they have a copy of this?
Yep, they have a copy of the bids and also a copy of the breakdown of
Okay.
the low bid.
So back on March 24th, we received bids for the window replacement at the ELC and the high school. And you see the results there. Low bidder was Mount Horeb Glass. We have interviewed Mount Horeb Glass and feel they're capable and competent to complete the work. We also have some asbestos abatement that's going to be necessary on the caulking on the windows at the ELC. So we've talked to asbestos abatement contractors, and we have a budget there. We know we can get it done for $5,200 at least, but we're going to look for another bid on the asbestos before we give authority for anyone to proceed on that. So with those two numbers, we got a window replacement project that's within budget, so we'd like to ask the board to go ahead and give us authority to move on that project.
Can you explain the value engineering deductions a little bit?
The value engineering was, we just looked at a different manufacturer. Basis of design was an EFCO manufacturer, and that's what the base bid was. And they came in, that put us over budget. So we looked at a different manufacturer, Manco. And we looked at the details on the windows and the design of the windows and the manufacturing of the windows, and feel it's a comparable window that's...
So same spec, same warranty, all that good stuff?
Yep. It's a good window, and it's going to work well for you.
Okay, great. Any questions on the bid? Or the recommendation? Okay, motion?
Second.
Okay, now I suppose I can ask if there's any questions. None? What is the wrapping beams at ELC?
We were working on as we were going through looking at the windows closely, there's some beams on the link, the overhead links at the ELC. They're steel beams, they're I-beams, and they're pretty visible, and they're also not a lot of insulation between the outside of the beam and the inside of the beam, so we thought this time would be a good opportunity to just put some insulation on the inside part of that I-beam, and then wrap it with some metal, so it wouldn't be an I-beam sticking out, it would just look better. And so we just thought we'd put it in the project as we were doing our design.
And these are exposed from taking the windows out, or just?
No, they're exposed all the time, they're just painted right now, so you'd see them over there if you drove by.
Okay, I'm sure I've seen them and just
Yeah.
never registered.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, great, all right, thank you.
I just have a question.
Yeah,
Maybe said I didn't hear it. Completion date?
Completion date is, we gave them a completion date of October 2nd, it's into October. So the specification requires the contractor, once the students and staff are in the schools, they need to work around the student and staff schedule. So that gives them an opportunity to either complete their work in the mornings or in the afternoons, or they can coordinate with the principals and the buildings and grounds people to make sure they're not interfering with student activities when they are there working. So, it behooves them to get their work done before that time. But we're relying on manufacturer delivery, someone on these windows, and we're kind of concerned about that. So after talking with the contractors, we felt we needed to give them a little bit more of a window to complete their work, to get good bids.
any other questions? Okay, thank you. So we've got a motion by Jeff, seconded by Keith, to approve Mount Horeb Glass, the low bidder, for the replacement of the high school and the LC windows. All in favor? Aye? Aye. Opposed? All right. Great. So we're all set. 6A, recommendations and employee employment status matters.
Which you should have received another one today.
Oh, I didn't see that one. Hold on.
I think, was that sent with the education committee?
Yeah,
Can we talk about paragraph 1 for a while, or do you want to make the motion first?
You don't want to pull that one out, number 1? If you're asking if you want to pull it to executive session, you could do that now, unless you're okay discussing it openly.
Oh, okay. Sure, we can pull it to executive session.
Well, I don't want to put words in your
Oh, no,
mouth. I just don't know.
I didn't realize we had executive session. I'm down here in the
Yeah.
bottom. We do. So
Yeah.
yes, I would like to pull paragraph 1 to executive session.
You mean 1A one?
1A, 1 and 2.
1 and 2, okay. So 1A, 1 and 2. Okay. Would you like to make a motion for the rest of it?
Move the rest would be approved as written, including the addendum we got today, later on today.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. Any questions or comments on these? Questions? Anyone?
If we know people on them, are we supposed to pull, how do we do that? I'm sorry. Do we pull them off? How do we, you know what I mean? Do we ask to have those? I'll just abstain. Because there's enough people here.
Yeah, if they are in your what
Immediate-
Barry say,
immediate family.
immediate family, or if
Yeah.
you stand to gain something
Yeah.
financially,
Yourself.
then you should abstain.
Thank you for reminding me. Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion by Keith, seconded by Jeff, to approve everything with the exception of 1A, 1 and 2. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. Yes.
Sorry, who made the second?
Jeff.
I did.
All right. Sorry, I got to get back to the agenda. 7, the consent agenda. Any items there that anyone would like to have pulled off for discussion? Okay, seeing none, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Jeff.
Second?
Thank you, Mary.
Sorry. Sorry.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, 8A, new business, update on weekend meals program. Ms. Dank and Ms. Daney, looks like. Oh, just you.
Speak for the group.
Okay.
So recently, we were asked to, or I was asked to look at the possibility of a weekend meal program, kind of like Sun Prairie does, where they send meals home with needy students for the weekend. And so I've been working very hard with Teresa, Mary Sutter, Mike Farrell from the food pantry, and Carol Nichols. And we sent some surveys out. We received, 187 back. And we got 10 responses that they were interested in receiving weekend meals, that this was something that they needed. So we decided this is a need in our community. So we're going forward with the plan. Our plan is to start the meals on April 17th. We sent, when we sent out the surveys, we asked people if they were interested in donating to the program, time, money, or food. And 134 said yes, and we have received so much response for donations. It's over $2,500, which is just amazing. So we live in an amazing community. Because our initial cost is to buy the backpacks to send home for the weekend, so we didn't have that money. So we were able to go to Bargain Nook. They gave us a discount on 20 backpacks, so we got them at a really reasonable cost. So we're ready to go, so we're meeting this week actually, and we've got our menu plan, and we're working with the food pantry. And then Mary McDonald Sutter's students are going to be assembling them weekly, and then they'll go home in the, on the bus with them. So we'll kind of start this as our trial. It'll be a good couple of months to try it out. And then next year, we'll have a sign up at registration. So I'm assuming that need will be higher when we actually are there at registration. So that's where we're at with it. So we'll be starting on the 17th.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Just the response, and
Yeah.
thank you guys for the effort. But I mean, the response is just moving.
Yeah, in like 2 days, it was,
Yeah.
it was awesome. So,
And then Mary's program, the
Right.
students with disabilities are using it as a job placement side of work experience as well to get
Yeah.
some on-the-job experience.
Do the kids have to use the backpack you provide? Just because, and the reason I ask is, at some point, will those backpacks be associated with the kids that are taking meals home?
well, I think that's something we'll have to look at, but we don't think so. Our plan is to have it right by the bus driver so that they're just grabbing it as they go.
Oh, okay.
And we
And-
can leave them on there too at the end.
Right, and bring them
Huh.
back. And then, yeah, and that's kind of our way to get the backpacks back too. If we don't get the
Sure.
backpack, then we might have
Okay.
to. So, any questions? So we'll have an article in the paper too, thanking those that donated, and the bargain nook, which has been great to work with, so.
Odds and ends.
And Odds and Ends is taking the stitching out for us. They don't have they're lands on return, so they're brand new backpacks
Oh.
with the initials in, so they're taking the stitching out. Yes.
Okay, excellent. No questions on that one? Okay. The next one is the update on food pantry donations.
Yes, there's a packet in your board packet. There's quite a few pages long. We were audited by the Department of Public Instruction, and we did really great on our audit. But and we did all the corrective action that was required. The one part of it, which you may have seen on the news and heard in the emails, but we were cited on food pantry donations. A memo went out. We started that about 2 years ago, and we've just, we donate a lot to the food pantry. Any unopened packages of crackers or milk, and the food pantry comes twice a week and picks that up. So it's a really great program. The kids are really proud of it, and all of that will be going in the garbage. Unfortunately, a memo came out in August that said that we were no longer able to do that. So when we were reviewed, they did cite us for that. And I have the exact citation in there. I was waiting on answering it until the director got back, because we had a lot of back and forth about, is there any way around this, or what can we do as a community, because our community wants to do this, and our school wants to do this. So the response I got was that they're still researching USDA regulations and Wisconsin food code, and they can't tell me at this point if they're going to change their stance. So in my corrective action, I did a write-up, and it's on the letterhead. I haven't sent it yet because I wanted your input, but just that I've shared my concerns with DPI, and we've decided as a district to wait their final decision. And I've also cited some USDA memos that support food pantry donations. Right now, it's just Wisconsin DPI that's saying that they're not in favor of it. So I have support from, I've contacted Mike Farrell and then the Hunger Task Force in Milwaukee. And I know there's other schools that are doing this also that haven't been cited on it. So I think with a little backing, we can maybe change their mind.
Well, yeah, it's curious if there's anything we could do to show some sort of unity, with the food pantry and the district. And otherwise, it's a tremendous waste. I mean, I remember going back 2.5 years ago and going to lunch with my kids and seeing those 55-gallon garbage cans virtually filled up with cheese sticks and yogurt.
Right.
So, well, thank you for that, and hopefully we can press them hard on this.
Okay. Thank you.
Any questions for Michelle on that?
So
No?
we're continuing to donate until we hear otherwise, right?
On their final ruling is what this says. So, I'm not sure what the response will be, but
Good, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks. 8C, discussion on board reorganization. Keith, I think you had requested that we put this on here for this evening.
Well, I'd ask about, one of the things that occurred to me is that that first meeting following the swearing in of the new board members is always kind of awkward because we're not allowed to talk about things ahead of time individually or share ideas with the open meeting laws, and I just thought it'd be a good idea if we could ask people to share their thoughts in a legal meeting before we get to that reorganization meeting where people kind of look at each other, well, who's next and who's this and what's going to happen next. So, just like to know if we can, if everybody else is comfortable sharing their thoughts on what the board should look like next year.
Any thoughts?
Well, I guess I'm the newest, and I know I've been learning a lot in education and finance, and I kind of feel like with just 8 months in there, I would really like to stay on those two committees, just because I feel like my learning curve has been good, and I'd like to continue.
Okay. I also, in regards to this next year, I'd be happy to take a director role if there was somebody else interested in doing the president role. I'm not married to that idea. I'm happy to serve however the board wants me to. But I've done it for 2 years, and it may be a good time for somebody else to try it. And, in that regard, I guess it depends on people's interest. So however that would play out.
Nobody's going to make eye contact.
Well-
You're not asking us to make decisions tonight, you're just
No.
asking to have a conversation about
It's just your
what
thoughts.
So we
our
don't,
position.
so we don't come here uncomfortable, surprising each other.
And out of whack.
And making decisions in 30 minutes
Yeah.
that affect us the rest of the year.
Well, I'll just say right now that I've enjoyed every part of what I did on committees and for this board as far as treasurer, director, and as clerk. So I don't care where I'm at, but I do like staying on the building and grounds committee. And I probably would like to stay with the finance committee too.
Want me to weigh in on my thoughts? Or
Sure, yeah.
Couple things. First of all, backing up in our history, 5 years ago when Dan and I were new on the board, we did not have a finance committee or a policy committee. But there was a time when there was a need for discussion in those general areas of finance and our policies, and it came with recognition that several of our 200 series of policies were out of date. And then Ken Cole asked several people on the board at the time if we'd be willing to meet to review the policies. And that created a policy committee, but I don't think at the time it was ever intended to generate a monthly meeting for 3 board members forever. Now, maybe that's since it turned out to be a necessity, but that was not the intent of forming the policy committee. It was to look at those policies that were most sadly out of date and get to work on them, perhaps on a Saturday afternoon, update them with input from our administrative council, and then move on. Finance, it was never intended the finance committee would meet once a month. The finance committee was going to meet in having board input in the preparation of the draft budget. So, but I think we've gotten in the habit of having these meetings, and I've said each year in May that I'd like to reduce the number of times that we have to have a meeting. Well, with all that said, also my very first choice for reorganization is that we don't reorganize, that we keep everybody exactly where they are for one more year. But I also understand the extra pressure that's put on Dan for the last 2 years. And I truly respect all the extra things he's had to do. So with that said, my first choice is that we make no changes for the board next year. But if Dan does want to spend his last year on the board, or maybe refresh and gear up for a third term as a director, I'm ready and willing to serve as board president for 1 year. This next year will be my last year on the Board of Education. And I think I've notified the appropriate people to that effect. But I talked it over with my board of directors and they're supportive. Talked over with my wife and she's supportive. That's my input for tonight.
Mary, any thoughts?
I have appreciated being on education, policy, and finance. It certainly has helped my learning curve immensely with kind of the general picture. I think I've been happy, and I'll serve wherever this board feels and Deb feels I'm best helping ultimately the students, which is why I ran. Having said that, I feel like, I do feel strongly that if any of us are going to be absent from a significant number of meetings, then we shouldn't serve on in a titled position, president, vice president, treasurer, or clerk, because I feel like extended absences cannot allow us to do the work in that way. So that would be one thing that I would just share. And then the other thing I would share is that I think we do a lot of things well on this board, but I think one of the things we have struggled with, if I may kind of lean into some discomfort, is that the relationships that we have with our current, with some of our school staff and some of our administrative team. And so I would like to ask, perhaps this is not something we've done before, but I'd like to ask for some input from them to feel how they feel we can serve. We are all here for the same reason, right? We're all here to help kids. That's why I ran. I haven't heard anybody on this board say otherwise, and I haven't heard anybody who works for our school district say otherwise. I think those who have come before me have done a phenomenal job of electing the right people and hiring the right people. And so having said that, where we feel we can best do that work and how we can do it in a way that is respectful of each other, I think is really important. So I guess I would ask that we lean on Deb to do some conversation around that and gather some ideas about how can we best move forward in a way that ultimately will best serve children. Now, I don't know what's going to happen with our strategic meetings later this week, but whatever that mission or that statement is that we come up with as a unified vision that we can all agree to and live with and share, I would hope that that would be student-centered. And I would hope that, having said that, we would be open, and I'm very open to listening where this board feels I can do my best work for students, but also where our administrative team and staff feel I can do the best work. So I would ask for that input. I'm willing to serve wherever people think that I can do that. So whatever makes the most sense, I'm open to.
Okay, thank you for that. So it sounds like we're all okay doing whatever we need to do. It's interesting to get the input of the administrative staff, how that would be done exactly. I mean, it could be as easy as one of your Wednesday meetings. They're still on Wednesday, aren't they? Okay. How you want to deliver that information, I don't know if you want to include that in your updates prior to the 19th.
Can I
Yeah.
interrupt you? Earlier tonight, you asked, because you're not going to be here on May 5th.
Correct.
And that is it a one date that you're out of town, or you're out of town all week?
I'm out of town that week.
All week.
So we had talked about pushing the reorg meeting to the 19th.
Oh, that's what I was going to suggest. We do it at a time. When all 7 of us can be here.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mention that.
Oh, okay. So the May 5th meeting will not be the reorganization meeting.
Correct.
Okay.
So that gives extra time. And again, it's just my idea of kind of how we can work better to build, and again, I'm relatively new on this board, but my feeling is the way that you build trust is to listen to the people who you've hired to do the job, and I feel like we all agree we've hired good people to do the job, and I'd like to listen to what they feel and also respect the board and their opinion, so. Gives a little extra time.
So without objection, we'll go ahead and ask Deb to pull the administrative staff then. Okay, good idea. So, all right, with that, anything else on the reorganization?
Thank you.
Okay. 8D, discussion of summer enrichment programs. This is one that, Deb, go ahead.
Well, I think Peter had wanted this on, and from my understanding, it's been discussed in, some years it has come up. Right now, our summer program is more of a remediation program, and this has been looked at before. From my understanding, from talking with Jared, is that we haven't had a lot of interest by staff, and summer school originally was designed to be a remediation program. I mean, that's why schools were given authority to have summer school. A lot of school districts have expanded on that, but we do have some programs that the rec department is doing that could be considered that as well in the summer. So I don't know, right now we're pretty much set for this summer. So this is, I guess, something we can continue to look at as a possibility for the future, but it would have to come out of budget dollars, which are tight for other things right now that we need
So
as
we
well.
would not be funded additionally?
You get funded additionally, but it's not a very large percentage. Under the revenue limit, you get 40% of your FTE, and you need a lot of minutes to get even one FTE, and then you get 40% credit for that. So you do, but it's
Tough.
It's difficult to make it as a moneymaker, I guess, so.
So what are our current summer programs? Summer school, right?
Mhm.
What else?
Well, right now, it's like band lessons and summer remediation, which I think the parents are contacted individually to see if they're interested in providing, or participating. So
they-
that's really a lot of.
There's criteria that they
Mhm,
have
yeah,
to do
yeah.
to meet summer remediation? And is that only offered at what grade levels?
Well, through middle school, I think, isn't it? And then there's credit recovery at the high school, but. So ours has been kind of a traditional remediation program, but.
And then we're offering camp invention, right? But is that no cost or?
No,
There's cost.
there's cost associated with that.
Mhm.
That's not going to be summer school.
That's, yeah.
No,
it's
it's
kind of
just
just an
program.
activity. Mhm.
That's not considered summer enrichment?
We can't count that for summer school if we're charging the kids like the whole cost of the program.
I see, I'm sorry, I was confused. Summer enrichment is only free programs.
Yeah, if you're going to count it for summer school minutes, you
Got it.
can charge for a very small amount for consumables. If you're actually charging for the program, it's not your summer school, it's just an activity, an enrichment activity, but it's not part of your summer school program that you count towards summer school time.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't understand the definition
Mhm.
of that.
So that's kind of what we've done in the past. So if we wanted to change it, it would, have to mean doing a lot of different things. And we'd probably have to spend school district dollars on that part.
Or have them run like we're running camp.
Yeah,
enrichment.
which is really not, like I said, really summer school. It's an activity, but the kids are paying the cost of the activity.
So the reason I'm asking is that there's been some conversation about driver's ed now that we're going to be offering it through CISA. And that's not been offered as a summer, or has it been offered as a summer? And it
No,
wouldn't be enrichment, it would be,
Yeah, they've driven in the summer, but it's been a school year program. But now it's really kind of out of our hands. The kids will be contracting this, they'll be paying CISA.
so they'll be paying, it'll be like
Yeah.
camp invention,
Yeah.
it'll be a
Yeah.
paid.
And it's not summer school.
Good?
But I
Any
think
other
it's something that we can keep looking at, and like there are activities like that that we can provide that are just funded by the families. but-
Well, and kind of breaking the agenda here, in regard to the discussion on the Village Rec Department, would you care to share at all, kind of the, how the curriculum and the synergies there? Would that be appropriate now, or?
And I guess we can, that's 9C.
It's further down the agenda, but it does tie into summer enrichment.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about that. We ended up talking a little bit about that at policy committee as well. I met with the admin team and we talked about how it works as far as like academic programs that the rec department is currently offering. And the administrative team feels like there's good communication between them and the rec department, and they kind of work together on doing a lot of these, so they don't really want to see a change in that. They feel it's working well right now.
So there's not concern then about the differences in curriculum? Fantastic.
No.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
So I appreciate that, but I also would offer that I think that there are some programs that I was kind of surprised at how much time, I didn't realize that that Rachel was, for example, coordinating for the summer program, and it made me wonder about, how much of that we're doing and how much of that we could be doing above and beyond. So to me, it still feels very nebulous about what is village-run rec department and what is school district-run activity. And not as a school board member, but as a taxpayer, I'm kind of confused about that too. Like when I pay, my husband plays basketball on Sunday nights and he pays like $3 or something to come and play. That goes to the village, but yet I don't think there's any registration. I don't think there's any information that's done other than it's just us giving the gym to be used on Sunday nights to play ball. And I don't know other programs. I only know the ones I'm participating in. So.
Go ahead.
And I just want to be clear, I don't coordinate at all that summer piece. The person who runs it came to me and said, what are some things as I run this kindergarten readiness class that would be helpful for the kids? So she and I talked about the different things that would be great, and she actually had great ideas as well. And the big thing was like the PBIS.
Yeah.
She shares some of those pieces and different places they can go in the building. We have a classroom teacher who every year volunteers just to be present, and they go down and meet her. I stop in and introduce myself as the principal if I'm available, but I don't do any of the coordinating. I just
Sorry, I should have
Just bounced off
said,
some
you
ideas.
spend some of your time to make that program work well. And my question is, if we're committing, and that's a resource, right? Admittedly, that's taking away from what you're hired to do. And all I'm saying is, if that's a resource that we're committing to and donating, so to speak, right now, right, we're donating it, would it make more sense for us to run the program, and we might have some staff that are interested in working that program, we might have that capacity, and then we don't have to pay for essentially a third party to come in and do it. That's my point. Is that clear in terms of where I'm coming from on that? And I don't know how many other programs there are like that, essentially we're paying the village to do the administration piece of. And I would wonder about whether or not it would be, A, provide us with better programs, and B, could it provide us with a source of revenue? I don't know. And C, could it provide us with better programs? So for example, the driver's ed program that we just talked about, so that students can, instead of taking driver's ed during the school year, which now is kind of a moot point since we don't have that capacity anymore, but I'll say, for example, Spanish. Are there students that are wanting to take Spanish during the summer, or physical education, so that when the school year is in, they can take their advanced placement classes? I mean, one of the things I've also heard is that it's hard to fit in all of the courses. I've heard a lot of high school students, and Blaine, maybe you can speak to this, who say, if I want to take this and this, but it's hard for me to take both of those because I only have so much time. And so you have to decide that you're not going to take architecture because you had to decide between those two. And so when I hear that, I think, how can we think outside the box and really let kids discover some of those, kind of personalized pathways about this is the time to try that out, instead of saying, nope, I have to decide I'm not going into architecture because I want my parents are making me take AP Science or something. So I don't know if you can speak to that, but that's kind of where I'm coming at, is maybe there's a better way for us to be able to provide opportunities for students.
And, I mean, I definitely had that problem as, coming into my senior year. It's going to be getting a lot of required classes done. So I might not have time for some of the fun business classes that I want. So maybe we offer some of those business classes, or some of the extracurricular outside, or maybe you do it the other way around, where you start, you kind of offer some of the required classes outside, so you have room to take some of the, the fun classes during school. I don't know, but that's definitely an issue. Definitely, and I know I'm not the only one. I can guarantee you every single one of my friends that I've talked to said, gosh, I really want Spanish. I really want to take Spanish 5. We're going on a fun Spanish trip this year, but I can't. I have to take, I have to take this required English class, or I have to take a required Fine Ed class, or something like that, something of that nature. And I can guarantee you that that's a huge number of students, come with that problem, for sure.
So the question I'd have then, is there a consistent theme of which course? Because you wouldn't be able to offer all the courses over the summer. So you'd have to figure out what are the most common ones that could be, that the seniors are required to take and could be shifted to the summer. Well, it wouldn't be seniors, it'd be juniors, seniors. There is no summer for seniors, they're gone, so, but for juniors.
And I would say the PE requirement, I mean, I know people that have gone outside of our district because their kids are participating in sports, so they're in practices for, some of them, 4 to 6 hours a day, and then they haven't done PE at the same time because they're in a sport practicing, or they're commuting to do their sport, whether it's hockey or swimming, or even some of our soccer, football, So I would wonder about that, because I've heard about that. I've heard about people who do, so maybe we could look at some of our data. What are students taking outside of what are they going outside of our district to pursue as one form of data, but.
So the question then would be, does this conversation have to coincide with the rec department? Because this is kind of, that goes back to the summer enrichment, to the district, to rec department. I could see where there certainly needs to be communication between all involved. But, how big of a shift are we looking at making, and is there a requirement to change the relationship we have with the rec department, or is this something we're talking about doing on our own?
Well, I think it's been kind of a nebulous relationship, if I can say that, because, look at Spanish, right? There was conversation about the rec department running the Spanish, after-school Spanish program. We decided to do it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't really understand that, what gets run through the rec department and what gets run through the school district. I don't have a clear understanding of that. It seems like it's just kind of depends on what it is and who's got the interest in it kind of deal. So I'm not sure that it has to go through them, but what I think there are implications certainly for them, right? Like if they wanted to use the gym and we decide to do a summer basketball program or a summer PE program, it's,
Sure.
Obviously, we're probably going to use those resources to help our students.
So, just out of curiosity, hey staff, sorry, can I bother you for a second? If you had to estimate how many students are impacted, like what Blaine said, where he and his group of friends have a certain number of courses they have to take for graduation credits, but then there's other stuff they want to take.
My best guess right now is about 22, because they signed up for the online PE class so they could take something else. But I'm not sure, because there's so many kids that would probably say, oh yeah, I would have taken this, but I had to.
If we're offered differently.
Yeah. But the online PE, we have 22 kids signed up for next year, and my guess is that's going to grow. So to probably more like 22 per semester.
Yeah.
So that's a solid group of kids who will replace that with something else, sports marketing or something.
Yeah, okay, thanks. So that's interesting points, Mary. That could be potentially huge for these folks that want to take different courses. So I don't know where we go with that from now for, after this. unless we have another conversation about it, but, or if the education committee wants to discuss it, or if the administration wants to talk about it, I don't know. What's your expectation? What kind of to-do do you want out of this conversation?
I would actually wonder about, not the admin team, and I mean, I certainly respect your conversation, obviously, but I would wonder about teachers and hearing from some of the teachers in terms of their thoughts. You know, we can sit and think that, oh, this would be awesome if we offered, I'll use Spanish as the example, right? Because my daughter was the same way. And you can offer so many college credits if you can get through Spanish 5.
Right.
You basically save your parents probably a good 6 credits.
Semester.
It's a huge amount,
Yeah.
right? And so if you take Spanish as a freshman for the first time, you miss out on that opportunity unless there's a summer school program. That's huge, right? I'd gladly pay for something during the summer so that I could recoup. I think we could make well with our money if we did such a thing. Just, I don't know what college credits go for, but 6 of them, I would guess, is not a small chunk of change. So, you know, but again, we can't do that if we don't have a Spanish teacher that's willing to do it. We can't do that if we don't have the staff that's willing to kind of commit to that resource. So I guess I would wonder about that with the staff to see if they're interested, and what staff are and what interest. I'm guessing they have a pretty good pulse on that, but what do you think, Stephanie?
No, I can survey them, absolutely.
I mean, I'd also wonder about some of our ag coursework, because really in the summer is the time to do ag coursework to a certain degree. We have that plot of land that we've grown some, but I don't know how that works. I don't know how we're providing that, and you know.
FFA is busy all summer.
And do students take that for credit, or they just do it as a?
That's part of their, just being in the FFA.
Oh, part of their.
They are busy
Mhm.
all the time.
So it might be kind of interesting to see what we could offer coursework-wise, given that. I don't know.
Keith?
There are some advantages to summer school, high school physical education. And the biggest advantage is that the kids don't have to be rushed to get ready for the next class, because it's usually the only course they're taking that day. And so there's plenty of time to accomplish what the physical education teacher wants to accomplish when it's the only course they're taking that day. They come dressed, ready to perform, hang out afterwards. They don't worry about how they smell after class because they're going home. So there are some advantages to it. The school districts that currently offer it have to have salary dollars, and they have to have part of their physical education staff on, 11-month contracts.
And even if it's not physical education, whatever course it might be, we're looking at expanding or extending contract lengths.
Or providing it as a additional employment opportunity. Could we not? I mean, would it have to expand the contract, or could we offer it as a co-curricular at a different rate of pay?
The response to that's out of my pay grade.
Well, there is, actually, like, summer school is an item in the handbook, so I don't know how you get around that.
I don't know. We can't offer an academic subject with something less than a certified teacher, can we?
No, you have to meet the
if
same
you're-
licensing
yeah.
requirements, and you
So-
can't charge for a course that you're giving credit for. So, I mean, that's part of summer school. If it's a class, a regular academic class that students take and receive credit, you can't charge, you can charge for consumables, but that's like what I was talking about. But you can't actually charge them for teacher time or, so then you kind of go back to the cost of it.
But I think what we're talking about is not necessarily offering a summer class that even, and I'll go back to the example of Spanish that Blaine raised, or driver's ed. I mean, are those things that people are taking for credit requirement to graduate? That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about students that want to take it so they can take the advanced placed classes, or they can take other classes. I wasn't thinking it's going to be people who need those credits to graduate. I was thinking it's people that want those credits because they need to get those requirements out so they can take other credits. But those sounds like things. So I guess perhaps this does go to Education Committee for further consideration, with maybe some input from, perhaps Blaine could come to that, but we could also talk to Stephanie Although I keep referring to high school, but I don't know if those opportunities are also something we want to consider for middle school and younger grades.
I'm wondering if we should survey the students and see what the interest is. I mean, especially when it comes to high school, they take part in setting up their own schedules. I wonder if that might be value added to survey the students and see what where their interest lies. Because I've heard of high school kids who want to take other classes, but they can't get the prereq. Or the prereq is something that maybe freshmen take, and when they're a senior, they really don't want to take a freshman class. So that might be an innovative way for them to take something that they wouldn't otherwise be able to.
Sure.
I'm just kind of speculating. I think there would be a lot of interest in an online PE or not online, but a PE during the summer, because that's what I've heard from a ton of people. And I know there's been discussion on the board about PE and how to solve that issue beforehand, but I know that's what I've heard from a lot of my student friends say. I have to take a physical education course because I needed to graduate. That would be a big one. I'm not so sure about some of the other ones. I mean, I definitely think it would be interesting to poll the students to see what they think. But I don't know if you would get a huge number of people on their summer break to come and take a course. But then again, it would be interesting to see. I would do something like that just because I want to take all the AP classes in school that I can. So I would do something like that. I know a couple of my friends would definitely take up that opportunity, but as a whole high school representative or as a whole middle school, definitely it'd be interesting to poll, for sure.
Yeah. And just as summer physical education could free up time in the 9-month year for AP courses can be offered in the summertime too, where you can focus on one academic subject. And I know that a lot of students have really done well when they didn't have the distraction of multiple disciplines they had to do homework for, that they have a period of time where they can actually focus on one subject. Pick chemistry, and chemistry is the only subject you're studying, and you can really focus on it.
Right. For sure.
Okay, so refer to the education committee, and then it sounds like there may be some other conversations that happen with Deb and some of your staff. Okay, anything else on that? All right. 8E, policy reading. You want to introduce these, Deb?
Yes, actually, one of these went through education. Both of them mainly are changing so that the WKCE test isn't referred to in either of them. It's referring to a state assessment because that assessment is going to be changing in upcoming years. So we want to include whatever the state assessment is rather than a specific one like the WKCE. Probably the only other change is procedures as far as reviewing them on an annual basis. They will be changed as we need to based on state law, as mentioned in the sentence before that. And they're both pretty close to identical in that regard. It's mainly changing the state assessment and not requiring necessarily an annual review, but requiring a review when the law changes that impacts, like now.
Okay, any questions on these? Has everyone had a chance to read these?
Yes. Do we need a second reading? Because the one thing that I know that remains unchanged is that a middle school student can get all Ds and still move on to 9th grade. That's nothing new. That remains unchanged. But most of these changes are just updating the terminology, am I correct? Yeah, so are we going to need a second reading, or can we approve both of these tonight?
We certainly can approve both of them. If you want to make a motion and if it gets seconded.
If someone else wants more time to read or digest it, I don't want to rush it through, but I read through those and didn't see any significant changes in substance.
There really isn't.
No.
So I'm prepared to vote yes, but if someone wants more time, certainly. Okay, then I make a motion that we approve both 345.41 and 345.42 after the first reading.
Okay. Any further discussion on these two? No questions? I mean, it is fairly, sort of a couple lines that are changed. Okay, so we've got a motion to approve both, made by Keith, seconded by Jeff. All in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed? All right. 8F, discussion on district Facebook page. This is one that Leah had asked for, so if it's all right, we will hold off on this one until our next meeting, so that she's here.
Okay.
Yeah. Is that okay with everyone?
Sure.
Since she asked for it, I think she'd want to be a part of the conversation, so. 8G, alternative compensation model update.
Okay, and I think it was asked last time where we were with that. At Personnel Committee, we have shared a lot of the different area, well, a lot of different school districts in the state, what they're doing for alternative compensation models. And from the January and February Personnel Committee meetings, and Keith, I guess, is the only Personnel Committee member here tonight, but the teaching staff that have been a part of that really did not want to spend a lot of time going through and coming up, going through all those plans and really developing one. What they wanted was like the administrative team to work on developing at least a framework and then coming back to them and working out through that group at that point. So that's kind of where we're at right now. And a group of us have met probably 4 times to start working on that framework, and we're making a lot of good headway on that. The plan is then to meet with a representative group of teachers and some of the personnel committee members and start kind of going through that basic foundation of what we're looking at and working out details of it.
Any questions?
So the admin team is meeting, you said, to draft out some of the details. Is this going to look similar to the other models that we've kind of looked at?
Yes.
That has,
Yeah.
I don't want to say steps and lanes because we can't use steps and
No.
lanes, but that have.
We're talking levels.
Yeah, okay, good. Okay, and Wanakee had, I believe, levels.
Yeah,
and we
19
talked-
levels.
Yeah, and we talked about also having vertical and horizontal, not steps and lanes, but whatever. And then the other question I had is just coming back to a representative group of teachers. The first group of teachers that you had, that you said recommended let admin take it, how many were in that group? I'm just curious.
That is just really personnel, which is like 4 more veteran teachers.
Yeah, okay.
And what our plan is, which we've talked about there, is to get people from, teachers from a variety of experience. So newer teachers and then some veteran teachers, because like we've talked about, it really affects the younger, newer teachers much more than someone who has got 3 years till they retire.
Right.
So we're going to try to get a group from the, using the principals to try to get a good representative group to sit down and really go through it.
Good.
So I
'Cause
think
we
some
heard from them.
experience is good too.
Yeah, and we heard from them at some of our prior meetings.
Yep.
But we don't always hear from them at the
Uh-huh.
personnel, so that's why I was asking.
And they are the ones who have asked to have,
Yeah.
they want to know,
Yeah.
how do I move ahead in
Right.
our school district? So
And-
that's what we're working on.
And
Right.
Peter and Lee aren't here, but the only question I had on the, as we proceed with this, was can we make sure that when we approve this, that it is sustainable, that we don't find ourselves 2 years from now having to either lay off staff or raid the maintenance budget in order to meet this payroll schedule. And so it has to be realistic and it has to be sustainable.
And that's what we're working on right now. I mean, that is a big concern. It doesn't do a lot of good if you have big jumps in these levels, but you can't afford to pay for that increase
Right.
on a year-by-year basis, because then it is really worthless, so.
And I would think that teachers wouldn't want to have class sizes of 45 in order for us to be able to do that either,
To
so.
pay them for their
I
levels.
can't imagine, right, that they would be.
No, so you kind of have to weigh all that, and that's what we're working through. And then I think then we're ready to move ahead with the group and get some input from everyone.
Other questions?
Just a comment of appreciation, because that's not a small task for Who's ever working on that?
It's Scott, Jared, and I, and we've spent a
lot.
lot of hours.
It's a lot of time.
What's the, from a expectation of the board and staff, when are you looking to have that meeting with staff to talk about it, to pull them in and start weighing their thoughts on it? And when, more importantly, are you expecting that you will have something that you would be able to share with all staff?
We are hoping like late April to have something to sit down with a group of representative teachers and kind of start hashing out details of it.
Okay.
And then I guess it's really going to depend on how that goes. I mean, if there's a lot of movement and things go quickly with that, so, but I'm kind of aiming for late April to really sit down with teachers.
But to make sure expectations are where they need to be, we've already agreed that this is not a plan for 14-15. This would be 15-16.
Right, because they need to know in 14-15, the most important thing is that when the 14-15 school year starts, all the teachers know, well, I need to do this, that if I do these 4 things, I'll earn, I'll be able to move through to another level. That they can't do that until the following year because they don't even know what those activities are until a plan is formulated. But then they'll be working towards that during the next school year, which would actually affect them the following year.
So the goal then going into next year is that they would have an idea of how points will be tallied.
Right.
Okay.
And there's still that transition. Right now, they do have the ability to earn points for credits and PDP, or I should say not points, advancement on the salary schedule. So there still is that piece in place, that we'll have to transition those kinds of things into our point system as we move forward too. But there still is a way for them to move, I guess is what I am saying. It's just probably not as robust as what our new system would be. So we have to keep that in mind as well.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments on this? It's big changes. I mean, I can't stress that enough from where we were a couple of years ago to what we're talking about doing now. And then the sustainability of it. I mean, that's the elephant in the room, is trying to figure out how to do that. So, okay, thank you. 8H, discussion on Administrative Board of Education Community Rep.
You asked us to add that last week.
Yeah. So this actually was also an idea that Leah had brought up in regard to how the board and administration is promoted within the community. So conversation that we had was a homecoming parade. The fact that we've got different grades that have a float, why is there not an administrator school board float, was one idea that had come up. And these are simply ideas. Simply ideas. You're in? And really what I think the goal of the conversation was, and again, Leah's not here, and this was something that she had brought up, and the rest of the board said, yeah, let's talk about this, is right now, we, as a district, we do a fairly poor job of showing who we are as far as administrators and a Board of Education. And what ways can we represent ourselves better to the community, make us more approachable, and be more active instead of being behind the scenes as much, being out in front of the community. So it's just thinking out loud, looking for ideas, but that's the thought. And I don't know if anybody else wants to contribute to this, if you recall comments that Leah had made, but it seems to make sense, to me anyway, is that there's an opportunity for us to make ourselves more approachable to the community and also let people know who we are. Keith?
Did I mishear you? Were you talking about homecoming parade?
Mhm.
I thought we were talking about the frolic parade.
Oh, could have been, well, a parade, okay, sorry. It could have been.
Either one, I mean, just given the choice, if we're going to be in a parade, I'd prefer to walk than ride.
Okay.
So you can dodge the tomatoes.
Dodge the tomatoes? Is that what you said?
I mean, you know,
We might be looking too deep into the parade thing right now, but I'm not sure which parade it was and whether or not we're
I
walking
think it
or
was
riding.
frolic. I think he's right, it was the frolic parade.
If I may.
Yes, please.
I think that, I think it's a great idea. I think we have to get back to what is the purpose, though, and the purpose, I think, was, I didn't gather that it was to be public, because I've caught enough of our meetings on, public access, that I feel like people do know who we are. I think it was more of, how can we work together with administration and the board on behalf of kids?
Mhm.
So I wasn't seeing it as much as show all the public how we're together, but instead it was actually, what could we do together that would actually be fun, not publicized, and be for the betterment of kids, instead of it being kind of, so I guess I saw it as with a little bit different focus maybe than others. I saw it as more of how can we, again, I'll go back to what I said earlier, which is.
Well,
I
that's
feel
certainly
like,
part of it, yeah.
That we work all for the same reason. We're all here doing the same, none of us are going to retire with a ton of money because we were on the school board or because we chose to be administrators, right? Although I don't know. That's my feeling. I feel like we're all in it for other reasons, and sometimes we lose sight of that. And so I think that conversation came up from Lee as, what can we do? And there were all sorts of brainstorms, including mine, which was some sort of consistent apparel, I believe, for everyone to
T-shirt,
wear,
I think, yeah.
T-shirts or something, so that we all kind of are unified. Because really, right now, it feels like we're not. The board does this, and maybe I just felt that way after the presentation last week, like here's the board, and here's the administration, and there's Deb kind of in the middle, right? And it felt like a little bit, wait a minute, we're all in this together, can we just think of what we could do? And Leah thought parade, and I thought T-shirt, and I think somebody said Dan in a dunk tank at one point as well.
Yeah, I did hear that.
He left that off the agenda.
that was one of the better ideas.
I thought so too. But I think that was the gist of the idea.
And it was, and I took that as implied. I mean, otherwise we're going to have two halves of this float, but anyway, yeah. No.
But I think the motivation being not because we want to do a float entry, but the motivation being that we're showing and we're feeling it ourselves, so.
Kind of team building.
Yep.
Yeah, which is really hard to do when you are subject to open records law and everything you do is televised and you can't have that conversation in the same way, so.
Right.
That was our thought.
So we will talk about this one again when Leah and Peter can be here. But hopefully that introduces everybody to the idea and of
Start
maybe.
working on the float.
Yeah. So.
I don't know if you're looking for comment about this.
Yeah, please, Jeff.
I think individually, we do communicate well in the community. I can only speak for myself, but, being involved in a number of different organizations and activities, both athletically and the church and everything else, we are reaching out, and I am known as the middle school principal throughout town. So, I think that that's understood and that communication happens. I do agree with Marion that that's the essence is coming together with this as opposed to not being effective communicators. I think we are. I think we do reach out.
Hopefully I didn't say that we're ineffective communicators. If I did, that was certainly not my intentions, so. Okay, but thank you for the clarification. Okay, any other thoughts on that?
Personally, I'm not a real fan of walking in the float because I think we all have a lot of float experiences that we do. I would rather see us join together to do something for our teachers. So whether that's we all agree we're going to serve breakfast for them on the first day, or we all agree that we're going to have a picnic and do something for them to appreciate them, because I think we all can agree that they are what make or break what it means for them, for students. And so I would like to see us do something along those lines, but I don't know if you were opening it up for other ideas.
Well, you
Absolutely,
send
because
those-
I think the whole parade thing was just an idea that
Yeah.
was thrown out. So, yeah, I mean, that's what ideas, absolutely. Rachel?
And I just appreciate that thought as well, because the first thing I think of is, okay, I'm already supposed to be in my church float, and I'm supposed to be walking with my daughter for Girl Scouts, and, you know, we have these parent responsibilities and our community responsibilities as well, that to be able to focus something, whatever we do around our school community, and, you know, as somebody joked with me in the grocery store on Sunday, I can't get through one aisle without Mrs. Johnson, which I love. I absolutely love it. And they're like, you do love it. You know, so I feel like I'm a good presence in the community, but I think working on this partnership thing, I think that is truly the essence of, you know, what we were trying to get to. So appreciate that.
Which I did bring up the district lunch, which we do now, and I think maybe 2 years ago, everyone kind of did it, and last year was kind of a last minute thing, so it ended up being administration, but I think we can all work on that, and that is a lot of staff members.
I
Teresa?
would suggest registration day that board members pair up with us administrators that are there doing the registration to manage some of the tables.
Could do that.
And
Diane?
hand up too.
I was just going to share what Deb pointed out. You know, the last 2 years, or 2 years ago, when the board and admin team served lunch, it was something that staff recognized, and they appreciated seeing us working together and having fun and smiling and chatting. And it's good for us to get to be side by side and talk to each other. We know many of you as your kids go through the schools. But again, it's just that nice opportunity. And I agree with Rachel. You know, we do, and Jeff, we have a lot of obligations already outside of school, so whatever, and I shouldn't even be speaking because I'm not going to be here, but I can't hold my tongue. I just think it's important that, you know, whatever we do already, you know, within our school day, trying to extend that opportunity, the, you know, unified t-shirt, I mean, all of those kinds of things, and our actions always speak louder than our words, you know, what we actually do follow through on. And I think with teacher effectiveness coming through, with RTI, PBS, and there are so many mandates that are being held over teachers' heads, any kind of support that we can give them also goes a really, really long way. So strategic planning and the continued dialogue, even though it may not be fun, working together, and when teachers see that that support is really there, they know that we're working together, because it won't happen without that. And I think if we can stay focused on that, you will accomplish that goal, and then building in the fun.
Thank you. Other comments? Okay. 9, old business policy, second reading, Director of Student Services, policy number 234.
And that did not change at all. We're just having our second reading.
Second.
Jeff made a motion to approve and Diana seconded. Any discussion, questions, comments on this? I know last time we wanted to have a second reading because there's a fair amount to it, so. I think a lot of it's legalese, isn't it?
Go figure, special ed.
And the policy committee
Oh,
has
go
reviewed
figure,
it.
you said, yeah. So
Couple
any
times.
questions or comments on that one? Okay, we've got a motion by Jeff, seconded by Diane, all in favor, aye? Aye, opposed? Okay, our second one is the Assistant Activities High School Principal, policy 236.1.
And the only thing we were changing on that is taking out, which we assumed was obvious, sincere interest in and positive attitude towards high school age students.
Are you okay with that one change, Mike? Okay. All right, do we have a motion?
Kind of a given, I guess.
So moved.
Okay, Jeff,
Second.
Diana, questions, comments on that one? Seeing none, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, 9B, discussion on HR personnel. So this is kind of a follow-up to our last meeting. We had started some conversation around at what point is the district going to be in a position to need some additional, basically human resources, expertise, knowledge, with the changes in Act 10 and as our district continues to grow. What's typically fallen on our business manager becomes more and more burdensome. So the concern over budget still exists, obviously, because you're talking about another administrative position. But this is just a follow-up conversation to that, if anybody had given it any additional thought and wanted to voice anything this evening.
Can I ask a question of the principals that are here, Dan?
Please.
Well,
Sure.
I'd like to start with a statement, and that's that I don't think our district can afford to add another administrator at this point, specifically for human resources. But it seems to me that, from where I sit, the decentralization would work. You know, for example, the hiring and firing of people inside the school buildings would be the discretion of the building principal, that the interview process would start and stop with each of you. A candidate for a position in your building would have to interview with you, and you then become the decision portion of human resources. And then that takes an awful lot of the burden off of the district office, where it becomes just an administrative detail to hire somebody and bring them on board. And the reason I say that is I don't see anyone in our district office whose plate is light enough now to give them another hat to wear that says Director of Human Resources, and I don't think we can afford to hire an additional police. So is there anything wrong with decentralizing our human resources down to the director level, whether it be a teacher in a building, for that matter, a custodian would be interviewed by Gary Wilkinson, a bus driver would be interviewed by Randy Schultz, special ed teacher would be interviewed by Teresa Daney, and decentralize our human resource decision-making down to the director level. That's just my thought on how to get through the next couple of years.
Most of that is being done now, except for, I mean, the district level, we're not that involved with hiring, except for like some
The paperwork.
administration. And Scott does do the weekend posting, and so some of those, there's some connection, but a lot of that we aren't that directly involved with. I don't know if you guys want to speak to that.
I guess when I think about how we go about filling our positions, usually anything that's a joint position between the building and like special ed, we talk about what the needs are for the building. We come up with the questions that need to be asked, how we're going to word the posting. We come up with a posting writing. We give it to Scott. Scott takes care of putting it online. We go through, we scan, we screen everybody. We set up the interviews either at the district level if it's a special ed teacher, or at the building level if it's a part-time paraprofessional. We have so many of those things in place already. And in terms of whether or not we can, I'm struggling with how to word this. When I think about some of the things that can happen related to HR, Scott is not an HR person. I'm not meaning to bring on your skills or.
I don't think he's offended.
Yeah, I'm not an HR person. Rachel is not an HR person. We're doing many HR functions, but there are so many things related to HR that gets you into, improvement plans and making sure your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed when you're having to go through and determine, do you have enough to put someone on a plan, or is it warranted to put someone on a plan, or is it warranted to do this, or do we follow the right steps for sequence for following the handbook and all of that. There's so many other questions that come up that are above what any of our knowledge is related to human resources. Yes, hiring, we already do that at the building level. We do it with input from people at the district office.
Some of the other functions, just within my area, tracking licensure status, tracking stuff like trainings for medical trainings, trainings for abuse and neglect, now educator effectiveness trainings that will have to be done on an annual basis.
Tracking Hep B vaccinations.
And fairly shortly, hours within the healthcare, that's a lot of stuff that can be centralized somewhere under some hat that currently has been spread across the district. And when you do that, you kind of lose some continuity as it goes from this department to that department, down to the buildings. And, the question comes, we had 3 of our buildings do educator effectiveness training day. Where do these certificates go? Well, send them to us, and then my department will work with Brian's department to figure out how we're going to track that in Infinite Campus. Then after we track it in Infinite Campus, it goes down to Scott's department to be filed in papers. So I mean, we all take our share of how we do that, but it's not centralized, and it is, it's segregated.
So, question. I agree. I mean, that's the observations that I've seen, is what you guys have said. When we have educator effectiveness and the reviews that we've talked about with some of the building principals, how is that going to impact our current system? And I don't know who wants to field that, you know what I'm saying though, because all of a sudden, time is going to become a lot more challenging, I think. And in that situation is the need for HR, because I don't believe, and I don't want to put words in Scott's mouth, but I don't think he has the bandwidth to add a lot more to his plate. So if you guys, which you are already doing a lot of these required steps for hiring and reviews and things of that nature, when our building principals start working on educator effectiveness, are they going to have the bandwidth to do all these other things that have always been part of their job but maybe shouldn't be? And the other thing that I get concerned with, and Teresa, you would know about this, is what's the legality that we have or expose ourselves to in having so many different people that are doing an HR function that, you know what, I have no doubt that some of you are very well trained and versed in what you can talk about, what you can't, and what certifications, things like that. But I also know that some of you are not, well, I don't think any of you are trained as HR specialists.
Yeah, and
so,
that's it. I mean, I'm working as an implementation coach for the district for educator effectiveness. That's my role. But a lot of that has to do with the training piece, and this is what it is, and this is how we're going to implement and so on. But when it gets to actual implementation, talking about who is making sure that the principal and teachers are following the timelines that need to be followed, that those evaluations are getting done in the timelines where the beginning of year is, SLOs were created and tracked, middle of the year conferences have taken place, all of those things. Right now, I don't know how I would fit that into my schedule to make sure that all of those HR functions within that program are going to be handled. Now, I can certainly sit down and talk and mentor them through, well, what's the next step, and here's what that looks like. I think that's within my job function. That is an ad that I'm taking on already. But then to take on some of the HR functions that go with that, I don't know where I can put that.
So I think that's the bigger question. Right. It's not so much about what we're doing today, but as we look forward, are we prepared for what this is? I mean, you think stress levels are high now. The conversation I've had with a few of you, stress levels are going to get crazy. So anyway, that's the conversation about, yeah,
I
Teresa.
just want to make one more comment in regards to the cost. It takes one lawsuit. One lawsuit, even if we win on it, just the amount of legal fees you're going to have having the attorney consult, you probably could have paid for at least half of that position. Just one.
I think Middleton would argue it's more than a half.
And that was one decision.
I would argue that we as a district cannot afford not to consider that. And I think we have to look at job descriptions, because I think none of us are HR people, so we don't know what their job description looks like. But I would wonder about being able to see if Deb or others could bring an HR description from, I know other districts our size have them. Maybe Scott might have access to that information. There are 4 kind of big legal things on the table, some of which were mentioned. Educator effectiveness is certainly one, in terms of how do we implement that in a way that's going to be done in compliance. And I think somebody mentioned, when you're doing improvement plans, but not only when you're doing improvement plans. If we miss a 3-year cycle, we're in jeopardy of penalties. So that's one issue. 2 would be the Healthcare Reform Act. I know that there's some conversation right now about our current cash and lieu policies that are going to run us into large legal troubles. And honestly, none of us have, I certainly don't, and I haven't talked to anyone in our board or on our team who have full implications of that, but it was mentioned at our finance committee by the representative who we contract from M3 that we need to consider that, because that could get us into, again, serious penalties. The third one is equal opportunity hiring practices. When you have a lot of cooks in the kitchen, all well-intentioned, excellent cooks, but you run the risk of having different people make things differently and seeing things different ways and being biased in certain ways, that honestly I'm concerned about some of the practices that we have, and I don't know all of the law. I don't know about when you have to open up a position and when you can appoint a position, just as an example. So for those reasons, I think that I'm concerned if we don't pursue it, we do open ourselves up for legal ramifications that I think are steep, and perhaps we need to consider how we can do our work better, and I think that's a huge one. So I'd like to see us bring it back next meeting with some input about what specifically an HR position looks like in a district.
And I agree with everything you said, and I agree with Keith right now, the added cost to the district. And Deb and I have spoken about it, and we've had a couple conversations about it, so she's thinking about how things could work. Scott's been in part of those conversations as well, so. But no, I mean, I think that makes sense, is if we were to look at what would that description be, not only for what another district similar to our size, what their role is, but then to see from the administrative team, if we start to extract some of these functions from each of your plates, can we pull that in? What does that do for all of our administrators? And what type of risk mitigation can we do by having an official HR person on board? Fair enough.
Personally, I see it as being more beneficial than a police officer at the high school, because I feel like it is potentially putting our district at so much risk right now, not having an HR person. That, again, I mean no disrespect to our need for security and safety at the high school level, but I think we need to have those conversations.
Well, to argue with you here for just a bit, the idea of one lawsuit would cost a lot. The lawsuit of an injured child because we don't have proper security in our buildings would far outweigh the cost of upgrading our secure entrances and having the police liaison officer too. So, if we're going to let that drive the train, I think the idea of someone having a miscue in their career advancement pales compared to the idea that a child might be hurt because our security isn't where it should be.
And I would agree with you. I just think, how do we get that work done in perhaps a more efficient way? Maybe we don't need to hire a police. And again, I have no idea what the rest of the committee feels, but it's not to say that that's a higher priority than another, but perhaps we need to think about where we can get that work done and whose work that is.
There has been some communication from Dave Ross that I have not forwarded, but I'll forward it to Deb and she can forward it to everybody. The projection numbers that I had worked on months ago now are less than half of what would be required for a resource officer. Now, we haven't discussed that with the village. We haven't tried to negotiate that all. But depending upon how much they stick to their request of, or, mandate that we finance, did you see that email?
Mhm.
I think it was 70,000.
Mhm.
So I
Might have
guess
been
it's more than
67
half.
the
but-
first year, I don't remember, but I thought I put it
So
in the
it's
district
significantly
too.
more than what we had originally budgeted.
Mhm.
And so regardless, we're going to have to rethink whether or not a resource officer is appropriate for the district. Well, and not if it's appropriate, but can we afford it at this point?
And there might be other opportunities that we honestly didn't explore, like our, dean of students or some other support that is not necessarily a village police officer that is manned at the door, that we might be able to get more traction. I have no idea, not having spoken to Stephanie's or anyone
I think we're
else.
starting to do some strategic planning, so maybe we
Later
should,
this week.
very good points, very good points on it. Deb, would you mind forwarding that email from Deb
Sure.
Ross to the board?
Can I just say, Dan?
Yeah.
I'm kind of wondering what, and not to put anything more on you, but I'm kind of wondering what your time as far as HR is right now. Kind of, and I hate to say time study because that's, again, adding something more to your plate, but if you can give us a general idea of how much time you're spending right now doing these HR functions, I think that would be beneficial. Because I kind of agree with Mary on some of the points. I think that we need to look at what other districts are doing and how that'll fit in here.
Are you looking for a response from Scott right now, or?
Not right this minute.
Okay.
Or maybe we could just go back and think about it or something.
One of the things I wrote down at the last board meeting was that it was supposed to be an agenda item at finance. You might recall that conversation. I don't know if we're still going down that road, but that's one of the things that I was anticipating for Monday because of the last board meeting. So I would certainly be able to provide you with sort of a diagram of what makes up HR in the business office versus budgetary finance areas.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
All right, excellent. Any other closing comments, thoughts on that? All right. 9C, discussion on village rec department. I don't know that there's much to discuss. Does anybody else have any thoughts on that? We talked about it a little bit earlier. No? Okay. 9D, personnel committee role definition. Did you want to touch on this?
Well, this has kind of come up at Personnel Committee, and Keith can probably attest to that, and Keith, did you bring that up with Barry?
It's in the minutes from the last
Mhm.
thing that, like, what is the role of the personnel committee, and if it goes beyond salary and benefits, then we should decide what it's going to be, but where it stands right now, it's really a salary and benefits committee. And that's what it is now.
Is there a need for the committee? I mean, we also do the employee handbook, right?
Mhm.
Review that as needed or on an annual basis. Are there other functions? So going back to your saying it doesn't need to meet monthly.
Well, that's my opinion, that it doesn't need to meet monthly, but the examples that I put on the table that, when our new 4K principal was hired, but the personnel committee wasn't included in the hiring process. And if everybody thinks that's the way it should be, then that's fine, but it strikes me that when we hire an administrator, that the personnel committee would naturally be involved in the screening of, or at least be at the table when the curriculum vitas and resumes are being screened. If there's a search and screen, then the search is also, they can play an active role in using networks available to us that for advertising a position. In my 5 years on the board, though, that's never been, the personnel committee's never been used in that that capacity. So that's why I put it, we talked about it last month. It's in the minutes from last month's meeting, so, you know, if Roy wants to continue just having a salary and benefits committee, then that's fine.
Well, would it be appropriate to ask the committee to define the committee?
Well, I did, but we didn't really.
You didn't get there?
No.
Because
I know-
sorry, go ahead.
Well, I know that both Keith Hutchison and Bruce Farron said they weren't interested in anything beyond salary and benefits. So the MHAP reps and the MHEA reps weren't interested in participating in a discussion beyond salary and benefits. And that's why I said last month that maybe we could convene the personnel committee to talk about personnel issues like staffing models and things like that, and not include the reps from MHE and MHAP at every meeting of the personnel committee. If the talk was going to go beyond salary and benefits, there's no need to ask them to come into the meeting room that night.
Well, and if that committee, and if the members of the staff that are showing up truly want to be only included for salary and benefits discussions, first of all, I think that opens up an opportunity for us to say too much or to negotiate too much in a committee, which in itself is dangerous. So I don't know that we should be doing that any longer, because ultimately that's what personnel was, you know.
It was a negotiating.
5 years ago when I served on personnel, yeah, it was a negotiating committee, and that's no longer legal, let alone required. So, you know, maybe there is still the need to review the employee handbook, and there's things like, there's certainly a lot more that personnel can be doing. But I would go as far as saying we shouldn't be talking salary, we shouldn't be talking benefits. Because with our alternative compensation model and things of that nature, those discussions are no longer appropriate with a select group of individuals. We're no longer doing that as a district. So I think that should stop immediately. And whether or not the committee needs to stay together, I would venture to guess that we should continue to have a personnel committee, but I think it needs to evolve, and it just simply hasn't at this point. And so the question I would have again is, would it be appropriate of the committee to come up and define what would be effective? Otherwise, if we sit here as a board and try to do that, I don't think it's appropriate, like tonight, to do that. But I would be more than willing to, outside of a board meeting, sit down and put together my thoughts on what a personnel committee could look like, and what the function would be, and how it would benefit staff and students and the district as a whole. I don't know. Diana, do you have any thoughts on it?
I mean, I think Keith's been asking this question for a while now, and I think the personnel committee needs to have a different vision, or it just needs to be disbanded. And if the employees aren't interested in doing anything other than salary and benefits, which we can't do, then I don't really know where you go from there.
I'd like to formally ask, the employees that are on that committee now, and if you have, I apologize, but I want to make sure that they say yes, no. If it's beyond salary and benefits, no, I'm done.
Right.
I'd like to have that kind of formally, whether or not they send us a little note, just so we have that. But I know that there are staff, there's teachers and other staff within the district that I think would really like to be a part of a personnel committee, but not as it's historically been known. Talking about how can we evolve the district. I know personally teachers that would like to be a part of that conversation. But then again, is this getting into the whole strategic conversation of who we are as a district?
Well, that brings up a whole other issue. Then if we're going to evolve it into that type of committee, that would be teachers appointed by us, not appointed by MHEA. That would be a committee appointed by the board.
Asking for volunteers and then selecting however many the committee can accommodate? Yeah, I don't know.
Because if it continues to be representatives from MHEA, it's going to get back into salary and benefits at every possible turn of the conversation.
Well, and we can't do that.
No.
So, okay, so at this point, what would you like to do? Anybody have a
Well,
recommendation?
we have a meeting coming up a week from Wednesday, and I've not seen the agenda, but,
Well, it's the same as it was. It's
Okay.
mainly employee handbook
Employee handbook,
revision.
yeah.
Yeah, to finish that process.
maybe if we can finish that up, and maybe that committee can go into semi-retirement for a while. And,
That'd be fine. If you can get the handbook done,
I mean, I think committees should meet when there's work to be done, not meet because we have a committee and,
Mhm.
you know.
Sure.
yeah.
We shouldn't meet because we have a committee, we should meet because there's work to be done.
Okay, so then maybe you can add as an agenda item for that committee, just something in relation to, you know, the long-term goals of the committee. So there's an opportunity for you to discuss it if you
Yeah.
want to, but you don't have to at that next meeting. And we can bring it up here again in the future. Mary?
So policy 185 lists the 5 committees that we have
Mhm.
as a part of the school board. And so we'd have to change that policy should we take that off. And I'm not saying I'm for or against, but what I am saying is I don't think that we've done perhaps a very good job of letting people know, and when I say people, I mean teachers and perhaps even some of our administrators, what are those committees and what do they do? Policy is pretty straightforward, right? We work on writing policies. Education, on the other hand, has blurred sometimes, and we're not exactly sure if what we're talking about in finance should be in personnel. I think Peter raised that at our last meeting. And so perhaps either we need to look at and revisit policy 185 and very simply define each of those committees and what their functions are. And I hesitate to totally disband an entire, I'm going to assume that this was done with good intention, and I'm going to assume that we should hear from more than 2 people about whether or not we should continue it. But on the other hand, if I was a teacher in this district, I don't have a clear idea of what that committee does. And I've heard handbook, but I don't know what that means because we're working on something now. And so perhaps it's not, maybe it just is that very thing that we're working on a compensation model as part of the handbook. I don't know, but so I guess what I'm saying is could we revisit policy 185, not in policy committee, but as a board to define each of our committees so that it's very transparent not only to each of us, but to all administrators, all staff, and our community at large.
I guess I would suggest that the committees work on some sort of definition and then bring it to the board, just because we could sit here with this,
Right.
7 of us forever and say, okay, well, finance does this. But I think that might be more appropriate for the committees to just work on their own definition, and then we bring it to the board as a whole.
And I believe there's some definitions, at least there were at one point floating around the district office some time ago.
But they're not a part of the policy.
No.
right?
No, they're not
Should
part
be
of the
separate.
policy. They're ones, I'll see if I can find them. They're ones that Wayne had given me years ago. But even so, it's years ago, so they're gonna need to be redone anyway. But, and again, it's an evolution of the committee, not the disbanding of it, or part-time retirement, I guess, until it gets redesigned. But also, how much of this do we wanna do prior to our strategic planning? That's the other, we got a lot of things, and we feel the need to start, to keep pushing this forward, but our next agenda item is strategic planning, so I'd like to make sure that we do it in concert with that, so that we don't start doing this. Okay, so then what we can do is perhaps add an agenda item for each of the committees to define the committee, and then maybe a month from now, or longer, Deb, we can put this back on the board agenda.
Okay.
So that once those are defined, because
Yeah.
it might take more than 2 meetings of a committee.
Well, like Buildings and Grounds isn't even meeting this month, so we're already into May.
Yeah.
Could I
So we'll
also-
play that one by ear.
Okay.
Could I also add defining what it is, but also who would be on that committee, who makes sense? Education makes sense, right? It's Jared and it's 3 directors, right? And one of those directors chairs. To me, I'm confused about policy because it's just 3 directors and Deb, and maybe it makes sense to have the president on that committee. I don't know. I'm just thinking outside the box about thinking about, if we had an HR person, it would make sense, they'd be on personnel. So, I mean, I think too, thinking of, and obviously Gary is on buildings and ground, but some parameters around, that might help define some of what those committees are. And certainly, we have other people that have come to education. When we talked about bully policy, I believe Teresa may have came to some of those or worked on some of that policy and gave it to Jay. So, I mean, we have lots of different input, but...
Well, one of the things that I've come back from every school board convention with is ideas borrowed from other districts. Not every district has committees that automatically include 3 directors. It might be 1. It might be a committee appointed by the board that has 1 director who's the board liaison, and it could be chaired by another person. A staff person, a community member, something like that. So, for example, let's take buildings and grounds, for example. In the New Berlin School District, the Buildings and Grounds Committee is chaired by the Director of Buildings and Grounds, and they have 1 board member as a liaison to that committee. And the committee is chaired by the Director of Buildings and Grounds, and the committee is made up of the head custodians of each building. And then 1 school board member is a liaison to that committee. That's just another way of approaching the problem of managing buildings and grounds. So there's all kinds of different ways we can do it, and it seems to me that we have 3 board members on each of these committees because that's the way we did it last year. Instead of that's the way that it needs to be done. And so I think there's all kinds of ways that we could approach these things. The education committee could be could be chaired by our director of curriculum instruction with a representative from each building and 1 board member as a liaison. It doesn't have to be chaired by a board member. It doesn't have to be. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. So there's some districts yet where the education committee only meets in the summer. They agree on the curriculum for the coming year, and they don't meet during the year. And that's a committee made up of 1 board member, parents, building principals, teachers, and a director of curriculum instruction. But there's one board member. That's the Sun Prairie model. And they meet several times during the summer, but once the school year starts, their work is done. And there's all kinds of different ways that we can. Maybe this is getting ahead of we should wait to see what happens with our strategic planning process and then include that in some of the ones. But I'm not convinced that we need 3 board members just because it's a committee.
Okay, well, we'll be talking about that then. So each committee then will have an opportunity as a group to talk about it and make a recommendation in regards to how it be formed and what the purpose of the committee is, and then we will discuss that as a full board sometime here in the next couple months. Anything else on that? Okay. 9E, strategic planning.
Just an update, we start our planning process this week, Thursday evening at 6:30. And that night will be spent basically reviewing a lot of information that we're compiling right now. And then on Friday, all day, we will be meeting and we will be developing beliefs and a vision and mission. And then on Saturday, we will be working on goals and strategies from those. So we're getting ready to go.
Do you have a refined list of who's on this committee?
Yes, I do.
Will you share that with us this week?
Oh, sure, I will.
Great. Any questions on that?
Jackie's made name tags already.
And it's 6:30 on Thursday night?
Yep.
Is the first one?
And I sent everyone an email, so they have exact, kind of a layout of what we're doing each. It's hard to have an ending time because we kind of need to get through that whatever activity is going on. So we have approximate ending times each time, but not a definite one.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. 9F, the 4K update.
And Sarah is here to do that?
A couple of things. So we have approximately 110 students who have enrolled into the 4K program. And we would like to send out our enrollment letters the week of April 21st, which is a little behind what was originally decided upon, which was the April 1st deadline. But with looking at the contracts between the sites and the school district and finalizing that, we don't feel comfortable sending out those placement letters until that's finalized. We have a couple of grants that we are submitting to DPI. The first one was a Read to Lead grant, and we'll be looking at mostly trainings with 4K staff, families, looking at early literacy development, and social emotional training. So we should hear back on that, I think, around early June, maybe June 1st. And then we'll also be submitting this week, it's due, the 4K Startup Grant. We'll receive funds from DPI for starting 4K for the 2014-15 school year. So those are year one grants. Other than that, Teresa, Rachel, I, and Kim Weeps, our early childhood staff member, met because we'd like to make our 4K program as inclusive as possible at the sites. So currently we've placed all of our early childhood special education students within the sites. I think was a big accomplishment and goal to make sure it was as community-based as possible to get our kids with their peers at the sites. Other than that, the 4K, Mount Horeb 4K is going to have a table at the Mixpo. So if you're going to the Mixpo May 1st, we'll have a table or advertising because we anticipated maybe 150 students, so we're at that 110 mark, so we'd like to get more advertisement marketing out about this program that we're starting. And I think some of the other tasks that we have coming up, we're looking at assembling family information nights in August where families can go to each site to learn about, sort of become oriented to the programs at the sites, and the students can sort of have a drop-in and see what's going on there. We're working on the applications from the sites, and then I'll be doing site visits within the next week or two once those contracts are finalized to hopefully approve all 4 sites that would like to be part of the program. So that's also why we haven't sent the placement letters out yet. So busy, busy, busy next couple weeks. You guys have any questions?
I have a question. When are the contracts due back from the sites?
They need to go out to the sites first.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm still awaiting a phone call from Frank Sutherland on just a couple of questions that Deb and I had after meeting over the contract. And so when we have those finalized, there are on a couple of things around funding, language, and insurance and so on. As soon as we have that finalized, the document's ready to go. I just wanted to check with him on a couple of things that he actually discuss, with him on. So I'm hoping, that we can do that very soon and get that done. My goal is to try to have them up by tomorrow, but I didn't get in contact with Frank today, so. Very shortly here.
Do the sites have a drop dead date for when the contract is due, or how does that work with the fam? Because I'm concerned about the family letters that say something would happen.
We talked about it, and they felt like they could get them back to us fairly quickly. And we didn't set a hard deadline, but 2 weeks from the time we give them to them is when we wanted to try to hit them back. But, they have the same process that we'll have to. They'll have to have it go to their lawyers, talk about it, any suggested changes, and then we have to have it finalized. But we're so really close. I think it's not going to take much longer to get that done, but it was a longer and more anticipated process than I had thought. And that's because I'm not a lawyer. I don't do well at contract writing, so did a pretty good job for my first time around. But
Any other questions? What do we do if, so you had said 150. I think before you got here, we talked 160 was the number at one point we were discussing. What do we do if we only have 110? Do you send fewer students to each of the 4 facilities, or do you tell one of the facilities, I'm sorry, our enrollment's not where it needs to be?
No. We have all students placed tentatively. Sites could open up more space if needed, but then they may need to hire more staff on their end, so they're waiting on that too. There's the kindergarten registration this Friday, so we're anticipating maybe some families are thinking 4K, K, 4K, K. So I anticipate, I don't know, 10, 20, I don't know how many come in maybe after that. So we'll have a better grasp at that point, especially then we can send our placement letters out. And that's why it's maybe better to hold off on placement letters for that other reason.
Sure.
Because we'll have a better idea once those
Okay.
parents make those choices.
Yeah, okay. I was just curious, yeah, Rachel.
And it's not typically out of the realm at all. For 5K, we typically add about 30 kids from now till start of school. So that anticipation, and actually right now we're sitting at like 140 screening, and we've added 10 kids in the last week for 5K. So I've given 3 tours in the last 2 weeks and with 4K potential. So there's these families that are in this process of potentially moving. So the numbers, there's still definitely room for growth yet. And that fact that we have all that summer time when families are moving in. But typically we are adding 20 to 30 kids. So.
Which would put us about where you want to be, close.
Typically.
I was just curious, what happens, We had a group of parents that didn't want their kids to come for 5K, so it's like.
And I know I had at least 2 parents call me and say, we're really kind of on the fence, we don't know, what should we do? And I said, by all means, wait. Our actual registration day is in August.
Mhm.
So if 3 months goes by, a lot of growth can happen at 4 years old,
Sure.
in 3 months. So if you feel better making a decision, then go ahead and make the decision then. And I think some parents are just doing that.
Okay.
So we'll see, when it fall comes. But I don't think the numbers will impact whether we run or not. We're going to run. We have more than enough students to run a program. And our sites have said that they can grow. And if they can't grow, we do have the alternate site in the afternoon, on site.
Sure.
As a possibility.
Do parents understand when you tell them to wait, they might be losing their site of choice?
Yes.
Okay,
Mhm.
just want to make sure,
Yeah.
because we always told parents just the opposite. Register if you're on the
Yeah.
fence, because at least then you'll know that you'll get the site that you might want to get. I just want to make sure that they're aware, if
Yeah.
they really wanted X site, if it fills up and they are registering in August.
Yes,
So-
we should share that conversation.
Okay.
So you're anticipating that the contracts will be signed before the parent letters go out?
Yes.
Okay. I
Yes.
just hate for the parent letters to go out and then.
Have something
What if
happen.
something
Yeah.
crazy happens and.
Yeah, no.
And that's why I would be doing site visits, sort of getting that legwork done as much as we can, and so we can sign the contracts and go.
Okay, great.
All right, any other questions? Comments? We're good? Okay. Citizens' comments. Randy, Gary? You're good? All right. Future agenda items? I didn't have any from this meeting
The Facebook page. I mean, just to carry over.
to carry it over.
Because we didn't talk about it.
Then we had the committee stuff, but that's not for this agenda. Any future agenda items I missed?
I would like to talk about the liaison role of school board members and what that means, again, kind of under that definition. So I'm the middle school liaison, and I'm not sure what that means or how that might be defined in the future. Should we keep that role? Should we not keep that role?
Mhm.
And then also with consideration of the admin team. We have a liaison for each building. We don't for the admin team, and so a question about whether or not it makes sense to consider that. Now, I'm not saying I'm for or against, but it was something that was raised as a question mark.
Okay.
And then the other one I would like us to, I would just like a update, and perhaps it goes with that, is just about the cash in lieu. I just want to make sure that we don't get blindsided by that from M3, and that they don't come back and say, yeah, you need to do something about it because the Affordable Health Care Act has now deemed that we're out of compliance if we don't, by having that practice. So I don't know if your group has talked about that, but I would appreciate any sort of update. You don't have to give that now, but in the future, I'd
Sure.
appreciate whether or not that's something that's being considered so that we don't end up having to do that.
And Scott and I, when we've talked with the insurance rep, we talk about that all the time, just trying to keep up to date on it.
Yeah.
They're still waiting for
Yeah.
a lot of details themselves.
So I guess I want to be proactive instead of reactive, because I know that there's strong feelings on both sides of the fence about it, and it certainly would, I want to make sure that people understand that the kind of, some of the motivation behind it is there are legal implications of that. So if we could have a conversation about what that means, that would be great.
Okay. Anything else? Did you get those?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I have them too, so. All right, and finance is taking the HR discussion. And then the committees are gonna have their conversation, so, okay. Schedule of next meetings is accurate with the additional information that reorganization will be on the 19th of May, as we had discussed earlier.
You might, but there's no BJT meeting on April 21st, right?
Oh, yeah, we aren't meeting in April. I guess, yeah, we're not meeting until May. I didn't even notice that.
Okay. All right.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I need the diploma signed after May 19th would be too late. Is there any way that you guys could decide, like, who's going to sign now? Or do you have to wait until you're all reassigned? Because
I didn't
then
think about that.
that's going to kill me.
Well, I mean, they could be signed with the people appointed as they are currently.
Right. For example, you've been the president all year for the kids graduating this year. Would that really be an issue?
Well, it's not an issue for me. I don't know if it's an issue for the rest of the board.
And it takes a while. I mean,
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Go for it, Dan.
So you and Leah would
Be signing all of them, yeah.
Is that an issue?
You're okay with that? Or no?
I'll be signing it.
Yeah, the
Right.
treasurer signs too.
But are you okay with
Yeah.
that? Okay.
Yeah.
Diana, any objection?
No, I think the smart thing to do is have you, Leah, and Jeff sign them.
Okay, so let us know.
I didn't even think about that when they said we can't
I
do it.
know, I was
So I'm like,
Yeah, I panicked.
Yeah,
You have that, so as
Yeah.
soon as you're done.
Yeah.
okay, yeah,
Okay.
okay. All right,
You need to come to the district office to sign them. You can't take them with you, so.
We're going to try to avoid coffee stains.
I didn't do that. Coasters. Okay, so the next meetings, Buildings and Grounds is not meeting in
Yes.
April, so that's not correct. Reorg is on the 19th of May. At this time, a motion to go to executive session to consider employee concerns and referendum concerns pursuant to 19.851 CF of Wisconsin statutes.
Second.
Jeff and Keith, roll call. Mary?
Here.
Keith?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Diana?
Yes.
And I'm also a yes. So let's take 10 minutes.